from the state of New Mexico's Center for Language Access, the New Mexico Judiciary. She's going to talk about their unique and comprehensive program. Paula Coselo Findigoku. Okay, close enough. She didn't cringe. Stephanie Franklin with the Office of Human Rights in the District of Columbia. The Office of Human Rights in DC is the most akin to our Office of Language Access, and our law was basically patterned after what they've done in DC, so I'm excited to hear what Stephanie has to say. Next is Kleber. It's Kleber, not Kleber, right? Kleber? Yeah, okay. Kleber Palma, who is a language access guru. He has come to Hawaii maybe 4 or 5 times now to talk. This is the 3rd visit, so we're very familiar with Kleber, and he's going to share some of the experience working for the New York City Department of Education on the municipal level, and they've got a very robust interpretation and translation program there. And finally, Elena Safarians. Okay, I got the inflection in the wrong place. So much for my language abilities. Okay, so Elena, it comes from the Healthcare Authority from the state of Washington. So if we could all welcome them to the stage. Why don't we start on the far end? Okay, so we'll start with New Mexico's judiciary, and I think, let's see, can we give everybody 15 minutes? Yeah, give everybody 15 minutes, and there'll be 15 minutes of Q&A afterwards.
Okay. So will you have my presentation?
All right, just hold on one moment, and I'll get this PowerPoint up.
In the meantime, I'll say aloha. I always wanted to say that. Thank you so much for having me. And I wanted to congratulate the Hawaiian Judiciary, the Language Access Program, Debbie and Melody, for the wonderful work that you've done.
I'm sorry, can we all hear her? Can you hear her okay?
Not too well.
Okay, if you could move the... And then apparently there's people getting sugar outside, so if you can kind of slow your speed down a little bit, and we'll get those guys sugared up and back in here.
Ready? So I'm Paula. I'm the statewide program manager for language access services at the New Mexico Judiciary. Our office provides language access services at all points of contact for metropolitan, magistrate, and district courts. I'm very happy to be here, and I'll be talking about our program and our language access efforts. The first thing that, as a New Mexican, I'd like you to know about our state is that we are part of the United States. Yes, American Airlines sometimes questions that, and when I say I'm flying from Albuquerque, they don't believe me that that's in the US, but yes, we are. Right there. So let me give you some ethnic and linguistic background about our state. So 47% of Hispanic and Latino origin. We have 22 federally recognized tribes, each tribe with a different culture, a different language. And we have 36% of the population who speak a language other than English at home. So we share something with Hawaii as well. 10% of the population reports speaking English less than very well. And in terms of the languages that we get requests for, well, Spanish is 90% of what we do. It's great to see the language variety that you have here. If you speak Vietnamese or Mandarin, New Mexico is a great state for you to come and work. So I'm here. So American Sign Language, of course, and then Navajo. The language distribution varies a lot from district to district, but Navajo, Vietnamese, Mandarin, and Arabic. We have several Spanish certified interpreters, not enough. We have several Navajo interpreters, not enough. We have 2 Vietnamese interpreters and 2 Mandarin interpreters and 1 Arabic interpreter. So again, if you speak any of those languages, you're interested in court interpreting, it's a great profession. New Mexico is lovely. So let me tell you about the challenges that we face in our state. 19.5% of individuals live below the poverty line. We are a sparsely populated state, only 17 persons per square mile. We have an increasing demand. For the past 20 years, the demand for interpreting services has grown significantly versus FY15 versus FY16, we have had a 30% increase in demand for services. And that has to do with raising awareness about the importance of language access, the fact that we have services available, and people getting into trouble. So 60% of the prison population is of Hispanic and Latino origin. And the other challenge that we face is that our state's revenue heavily depends on oil. So you know that that's really, really bad news for us. Let me see. So why do we provide language access services? Well, it's the right thing to do, of course. We believe in it. But at the same time, it's the law, right? And you're all familiar with Title II of ADA, Title VI of Civil Rights Act, the executive order. Well, let me tell you a little bit about our New Mexico statutes. So we have the Deaf Interpreter Act, that's what we call Deaf Interpreter Act, and the Court Interpreter Act. And basically what they say is that individuals with limited English proficiency have the right to an interpreter in any hearing or administrative procedure. So we provide interpreters for criminal and civil. And it has to do with who is the party of interest in the case, right? In terms of the New Mexico Constitution, it provides LEPs with the right to an interpreter. And something unique that we do in our state is that we do provide interpreters for LEP jurors. We do this in jury selections, we do this in grand juries, and of course in trials, both civil and criminal. And then we have DOJ policy that requires that equal access is be provided at all points of contact. All this relates also to due process. How can somebody have a fair trial or confront adverse witnesses or have equal protection of the laws if they're not meaningfully present, if they're not able to understand what's happening, right? So there's case law, Negron versus New York, that talks about being physically present but also linguistically present to provide meaningful access. So DOJ requires language access at all points of contact. So in the courtroom, we provide certified interpreters or qualified interpreters for spoken and sign language, civil and criminal. Outside the courtroom, we provide services, for example, at the self-help center, customer service, court order services, and legal clinics. And we do that through either interpreters or bilingual staff or on-demand interpreting services like phone type service, or we are testing now, if you look at the picture that has the video, we're testing remote interpreting services for sign language, just for those who come to the self-help center and they haven't requested an interpreter, or they haven't requested the accommodation. We want to have something that kind of goes in line with the phone or the 1-800 number. That's how our courts call it. So we provide access to our courts through a centralized management and funding of language access services. So everything that the courts do in terms of providing access comes from our office. We have a budget of $3.2 million that allows us to provide services. We struggle every year to make it to the end of the fiscal year. We never do, ever, historically, but that's another issue. But yeah, we have funding issues, and we've always had them, but here we are. So we also support our courts with language access planning. So we have a statewide language access plan, and we also have 13 different language access plans, one for each judicial district. We have a certification and credentialing program for court interpreters. We also provide multilingual signage and I speak cards, for example, for language identification. And we provide on-demand remote interpreting services and translation of documents and forms. We have the Language Access Advisory Committee that helps us and gives us advice in terms of how to handle these. We also address literacy issues. It's not always about somebody who speaks another language, but how about the people who are not able to read the English language. And last but not least, training. This has been a key element in our program. Training for interpreters. That's how we started. We started training court interpreters. But then we realized that there's a lot that we have to do outside the courtroom and at the first point of contact, right? And how do you do that? And how do we train our judges, right, to work with interpreters, cultural competency, etc. For that purpose, back in 2009, we created the New Mexico Center for Language Access. And that is a program that was part of the University of New Mexico. We did a collaboration with the University of New Mexico, and then the program transitioned to the New Mexico Judiciary about 4 years ago. It's a self-sustaining program through student tuition and consulting fees. And we're able to deliver quality training mostly online because, well, we have limited resources and we have a sparsely populated state, huge territory. We can't have people, traveling to get training. So we try to develop online components as well as software, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. And we also integrate that with in-person training, internships, court observation, and also a partnership with the law school, the University of New Mexico Law School. And we take our students, court interpreter candidates, to the annual mock trial so that they can get familiarized with a trial. And also for the attorneys to, have a heads up that there's an interpreter there, right? In terms of training for judges, we just finished our web portal. It's a portal that has different sections, resources, Supreme Court rules, but also videos. I was lucky enough to work with Justice Chavez and got him to do a whole bunch of videos for us, and so that's been very helpful. How to work with Lep jurors, and this is all for jurors, right? For judges. How to work with Lep jurors, how to work with the deaf and hard of hearing, with Native Americans, cultural competency, etc. And I also post all my memos there. for reference. We also have a language access site where we have our policies, complaint forms. If somebody wants to complain about language access not being provided, we haven't had that. And we also, last year, we started doing our annual report. And it's also a training tool that, tells everybody in the judiciary what we're doing and what, what's expected in terms of policies. In terms of training technologies, we developed 2 self-paced training suites. One is a court interpreter orientation that's been now developed with several other states. It's an entry-level type training for court interpreters, court interpreter candidates. And we also have the language access basic training that we developed with other states as well through a grant from the State Justice Institute. And these are available on our website if you want to check them out. The first module of each of the programs is available for you to see. And 2 years ago, I started working on another SJI project that has to do with improving access to justice for Native peoples. Whenever we think of interpreters, we always think of immigrants like myself. But how about Native Americans? The judicial system is foreign to them. And there's a lot of cultural brokerage that needs to take place within the boundaries of the profession. So it's been a great privilege and honor for me to be able to work with the Navajo, members of the Navajo Nation and several pueblos in New Mexico. The program that we are developing has different components: a court interpreter orientation, training for court interpreters, training for judges, a certification program, and a documentary that's going to be our it's our final report to the State Justice Institute, but we wanted to make it a documentary with testimonials from different members of the teams. So as a way of conclusion, as Einstein said, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. For us, it's been very important to set goals and priorities and create a plan and to follow through. Collaborations and use of technology for us have been key. We have very, very limited resources, and that has been the best approach for us. We couldn't have done anything without the support of the New Mexico Supreme Court. They're extremely supportive in everything that we want to do. Also, the administration, we come up with these plans and ideas, and they always say yes for some reason, and they're unbelievable. And as the program grows, pieces fall into place and resources are put into use, even in manners that perhaps 10 years ago we didn't even think about. So that is my presentation.
Thank you, Paula. I think we still have a few minutes left for her, right? So we have one question specific on the New Mexico experience. Considering that 90% of your language need is Spanish, do you have interpreters, translators on staff?
We have, let me tell you about how our program is run. So I'm the statewide program manager. There's 5 coordinators who are also interpreters, and they provide interpreting services and schedule interpreters for the court. So we fund and manage interpreting services for everybody in the state, in the judiciary. And then we have a couple of staff interpreters in Metro Court, but everybody else is, they're contractors.
Okay, thanks. That's the last of the court-specific questions I have for you. But just one thought that or one thing I wanted to highlight about New Mexico that I found pretty interesting is that your jurors have a right to interpreters. And I remember, I think Justice Wilson had asked me about that. Like, what about our jurors? Because it seems like a lot of jurors will almost use their limited English proficiency as an excuse to get out of jury duty.
Can't do it in New Mexico.
Yeah. So could you just comment on that just for a moment?
Yes, we have special jury instructions. I mean, it is doable. It is a challenge. We have limited resources. I mean, think of jury selections, right? You start the jury selection process, you go to trial in the afternoon. So, yeah, it's not easy, but it is the law. I mean, it is in our Constitution. And in the end, how can you have representation of the community if you're excluding people who do not speak the language? And in some counties, actually, we have, non-English speaking jurors 90% of the time. So that's telling us something, right?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's remarkable that it's in your Constitution. Mm-hmm. So, okay, so with that, I have some other questions, but I'm saving them for last because they're not specific to each of the representative capacities of our panelists here. So I'll wait until the end. So we'll move on to the Office of Human Rights in the District of Columbia. And as I said, this is probably the only office in the U.S. that's most akin to what the Office of Language Access is like here in Hawaii, but much bigger and better funded and the rest of it.
I don't know about all that. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Franklin, and I'm from the D.C. Office of Human Rights. Our office is part of the local government in D.C., so we're not part of the federal government, even though we always kind of get wrapped up in there. I think I'm going to be sitting on a panel with some of my Fed friends, but our agency is the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency for the District of Columbia. So we enforce a number of civil rights statutes around a number of things, and anyone who lives, works, or visits DC can utilize our office to file a complaint of discrimination. So I think a lot of the work that we've done around language access has come from the perspective of making sure that we're not discriminating against people that are moving into the District of Columbia for any given reason. So prior to me being in the role that I am today, I worked in the Language Access Program, which is housed within the Office of Human Rights for 3 years. And one of the things that I saw is that unlike here, and I've been here for about 9 hours now, but one of the things that I've learned in my 9 hours of being here is that it seems that there's a lot of history here in Hawaii of kind of diverse communities kind of landing here and kind of starting a legacy of, generations of their families kind of staying in this area and, speaking different languages and kind of coming together as one community. In DC, it's been a very, very different experience, the wave of immigration. DC, has anybody been to Washington, DC? Oh, a number of people, great. You should come back, it's far away. Washington, D.C. has, what I like to call 3 layers to it. So you have Washington, which is, the White House, the federal government, all of these kind of major things. The comma in between, which is like the museums, the Smithsonians, the monuments, people that, come visit embassies, things of that nature. And then you have the District of Columbia, which is really a place that's been a pillar of freedom and democracy for a lot of communities, even thinking back to, slavery and, freedmen, free women kind of flocking to DC, this newly created DC, which was supposed to be just a host for the federal government, kind of flocking there to start a life and build a life that they deemed meaningful, right? So that same message has been sent to so many different communities, for decades, for generations, for centuries, that this is a place where you can kind of come and fulfill the American dream in, whatever fashion you deem that to be meaningful to you. So a lot of the populations that have flocked to DC, have come, in times of need, from the civil wars that have happened in El Salvador and other parts of, Central and South America, to famines that happened in East Africa, to, the Vietnam War and refugees coming from different parts of the world where, these outbreaks seem so much like a daily thing. They kind of land in DC hoping that they're able to build a life there. And mixing that with DC being a predominantly black city, that has created a lot of, not necessarily tension, but it's created an atmosphere in which we have to be very creative in how we are able to implement laws. Fast forwarding to today, DC is a very mixed community. It's in the midst of gentrification. There are a lot of different things that are happening. But one of the other unique things about DC is that we're not a state, but we're also quite not like a city either. We're somewhere in the middle. So when you have different communities, when you have tensions, when you have all these government services, but all of these other government actors, but limited resources and power in order to really be able to effectively implement laws, that also creates another bit of, frustration as far as like really being able to affect change. So, what I kind of want to talk about as far as our successes and our challenges in DC is really about putting people first. And I think, the coalitions and the community leaders that helped to push for us to have a language access law, back in 2004, really, put a lot of, heart and thought into placing the language access program within the Office of Human Rights, because it is a human right to be able to, live in a community and be able to have the same access to services and things that a city has to offer. So with that being kind of the middle point, it's about putting people first. And one of the, I think, primary focuses for us as far as a success is really being able to engage these different communities and understand their individual needs, and taking those into consideration when dealing with a host of government agencies. So the way that our law is set up is that the language access program is set within the Office of Human Rights, yet we're the enforcer of the law. So that means if there's a complaint of discrimination that comes to us from one of these communities, we have to investigate that, and that may be us having to go against one of our brother or sister agencies and say, you were wrong, you violated the law, these are the damages you need to pay out. But on the other end, it's also to provide technical assistance to them and to the community about what their responsibilities are and pool resources in order for them to be able to do their work effectively. So having that dual role, can be challenging sometimes, but again, keeping that putting people first mentality at the forefront has really been helpful. So ways that we've been able to achieve that on the end of the communities is really trying to empower people. And I can't remember who it was, I think Bridget said this from the last panel, that, really empowering people that come from places that, see government as a threat and aren't, comfortable with coming forward to say, someone violated my rights or someone treated me poorly or I wasn't able to get, X services because I speak this language. That's a real thing. And people are like deathly afraid to even consider coming to talk to anybody about the fact that they weren't able to enroll their child in school, or they weren't able to get their driver's license, or they stood in line for 4 hours trying to get food stamps and they were not able to do that. So one of the things that we've done are a multitude of awareness campaigns that we've posted all around the city, within the metro system, in newspapers, in different ethnic newspapers, on the radio, to kind of empower people to say, we understand that immigrants contribute to our society here in DC, and we want you to come forward if basically anything happens to you. You have the right to file a complaint. And that has really, I think, given people encouragement to at least come talk to us when they see that something isn't going as it should be. Another thing that we've done is started a program called the Human Rights Liaisons program. And what we'll do is a number of the community-based organizations that we work with that provide kind of those intermediary services that maybe the government isn't able to provide but the community needs, going to them, getting some of their social workers, getting some of the caseworkers to be trained on our laws in DC, to be able to kind of intervene and say, as they're talking to their client, like, that's not what you're describing happened to you sounds like it could be discriminatory. Like, let me tell you a little bit about the Office of Human Rights and how they can help you get to whatever end. So really empowering even the people that those communities trust the most with their problems to be able to direct them to our office has been a success as well. Another thing that we've done on the agency side, and I've heard this several times now, is really putting training at the forefront of everything. One of the things, during my time in the Language Access Program, one of my jobs in that was to go around to different government agencies and to train their staff around cultural competency and around the laws. Now, I will tell you that it is difficult getting in a room of sanitation workers who don't really care about, interacting with people. It's like, I pick up trash, or I'm like writing somebody a parking ticket or something. Like, why do I need to be talking about this? But to have to sit there, at 11 p.m. at night, like at, the beginning of their shift, to be like, this is why this is important. Let's say you get dropped into the middle of some X country and you have to find, your way to housing, or you have to find your way to a grocery store, you have to find your way wherever. How are you gonna do that when you don't speak that language? Now, imagine someone that has been through a tremendous life experience, ends up in DC somehow, and all they're asking is for you to tell them what the parking sign says. Are you really just gonna ignore them, or are you really just gonna write them off, or are you going to try your best to get that person's question answered? So really humanizing the experience and really training people to understand these are other human beings, and it's not always their choice to be here, nor is it their choice to have to want to interact with you, who may be putting your biases first, or putting your perceived notions of a particular community first. But it's setting that aside and saying, you've chosen to be a public servant, so now that you've chosen that, this is what your job is. And I'm sorry to say, but you're just gonna have to figure out a way to help this person. So I think, sitting down and really talking to people from that perspective, they, I think, understand a little bit better that it's not always about them, and it's more about you kind of making sure that, whatever experience that you are making for that person is something that you would want for yourself in any given situation. So, challenges that we've I think, seen in the last 12 years since we've had our law enacted is, number one, like I said earlier, is getting people to file complaints. And I think Bridget said this as well. Bridget had a lot of great points. Is that, once people start to come forward and complain, that kind of sets a spark for change to happen, because then it becomes real, we have to pay out money, or we have to change our policies, or we have to do X, Y, and Z to make sure that we're serving this community, because we don't want our reputation to be bad. And we see this even with our other civil rights laws in DC, that nobody wants to have that reputation as being, this place that discriminates against, Latinos, or people that discriminate against people with disabilities or whatever. Nobody wants to be that guy, right? So making sure that people are coming forward and actually acknowledging when these things happen, and kind of going through that pipeline, and when a violation occurs, that is an opportunity to create change within agencies. But it's a real challenge getting people to do that. Another thing is the Language Access Act in DC is an unfunded mandate. So, just like you were saying, that creates opportunity to kind of be creative with how you have to implement the law, but when you don't have any, particular funding secured for the entire city to do this, you're basically begging agencies to commit to this law and to make sure that they have things in place. That can be a real challenge. So a lot of what we've tried to do is really garner support within agencies that have similar services. So whether that's the police department and fire and EMS, group up together and pull resources from each other in order to help make that happen, because a lot of the situations that the police department might deal with, that the fire and EMS department may deal with, or what the District of Columbia Public Schools deals with, may deal with similar issues as the Department of Parks and Recs. So really trying to get agencies to come together to pull resources. Bilingual staffing is also an issue. We have a very robust translation and interpretation service kind of resource center where we have a number of contractors. I mean, it is DC, so there are a number of embassies. There are a lot of people that speak different languages that have certification to do so. So there's no reason that you can't contact someone to get that service. But I think, again, it's that monetary piece to it and really making sure that people are investing in hiring people that are full-time staff members that have those language skills to kind of play that role of a bilingual caseworker in order to interact with communities versus always having to go out to get a contractor to do it. And then I think the last thing is maintaining kind of an accurate count of the demographics in the city. As I said, there's a lot of things that are changing in DC right now, and there are a number of communities coming from different parts of the world that we didn't have to interact with prior to. For the longest time, there were only 6 top languages other than English in DC. Now we have about 20. So maintaining the demographics and understanding the communities that keep coming in is a real thing that we have to keep in mind when procuring services and getting a better understanding of those communities. So I think moving forward, what I would just say from what we've learned is that we just have to remain agile, right? We have to remain adaptable, and we have to keep our ear to the ground to make sure that we're making the best choices that's bringing a society together and being more inclusive and integrating people as they arrive versus isolating them further. So I look forward to learning more about what some of the other jurisdictions are doing, and I hope anything that I've said has been helpful for you all. Thank you. And my timer went off just on time.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was very interesting for me, and I'm sure Helena to hear, because there's so many parallels in your experience that we know here as well. So I have a couple questions that I'll probably get to after everyone on the panel is finished, because I think everyone else could chime in them as well. But for right now, it seems like we're right on time, and so we'll move on to Elena's presentation about the Healthcare Authority in the state of Washington. Thank you. Oh, you have a PowerPoint, yeah?
Hi, can you hear me? No? Hello? Like this? Oh, wow, okay. Aloha. Sounds so tasty in my mouth. And I would like to greet you in some Slavic languages. Здравствуйте. It means I'm wishing you health in Russian. Здоровенькі були. Same thing in Ukrainian. My ethnical background is I'm exactly 50-50. I'm 50% Russian and 50% Ukrainian. Both sides of the family claim me as their own. And as you know, in today's world, it's not an easy thing to be 50-50, because it's almost like I'm in the place where I have to choose the side, and I refuse. I refuse to do so. So I am who I am. I'm 50% Ukrainian, 50% Russian, and I am USA citizen now. So I will show you my presentation that I showed last year, prepared it for our extended management team, so that they can kind of understand what exactly are we doing in our agency on language access services. We used to be one with Departments of Social and Health Services, and then because of the legislative mandates, we were separated from that department, became just single agency and Medicaid agency, state agency. And we found the challenge of making sure that our new leadership understands what language access services are. At the same time, with the Department of Social and Health Services and newly developed Department of Health Benefit Exchange, which is a quasi-government agency that was created based on the Affordable Care Act as a health plan finder, we're sharing the same populations that we serve. So I created this little at a glance, and that's exactly what I will do, language access services at a glance, because we tomorrow will be talking a little more in depth about creating bilingual and multilingual workforce, and also we will be talking a little more about the lessons learned through the years that in Washington State we implemented language access for all our clients. I probably will skip this because you heard a lot about the statutes, Title VI of Civil Rights Act, then followed by executive order. Then we also heard about the established class standards, cultural and linguistically appropriate services standards. Just not long ago, we've heard about the Section 1557 on non-discrimination that also talks about language access for limited English proficient folks under the Affordable Care Act. And tomorrow, I know that Christine Stoneman will talk more about that from the federal standpoint. She actually had the same online presentation for us in Washington State a couple of years ago. It was very informative, and at the same time, it was communicated to us very clearly that feds are in enforcement mode now. And I can attest to you that a lot of Washington State agencies have been already visited by feds. The last one was our Department of Licensing. They received technical assistance, but at the same time, they were given a very strict time frames to rise up to the step and show that they're actually in compliance with all the requirements. So just to kind of warn you, be prepared. We are really struggling and committed to provide equal access, and our state governor is very strong on achieving equity in every kind of service that our citizens of Washington State can approach. But as we said, this is the right thing to do. Everybody said that, and I like approaching the audiences from that perspective, because just saying that there will be a lawsuit or there will be complaints or something else, sometimes I hear back, okay, let there be a lawsuit. Then maybe we will get funds. Then maybe it will become a priority. But my human nature really requires me to say, let's look at it from the human perspective. Where would we want to be if we found ourselves in similar situation? And I don't know if the video will play, but I wanted to make very, very short, but the very beginning. So let's see what happens. No, it doesn't. But the... Let me try. Okay. And I will tell you when to stop, because I want you to see just the very beginning of this fragment. So it's about communication, right?
Looking good?
Do you speak English?
Inglés no. Mi nieta se cayó a través del piso. Vivimos en la calle 9, número 529.
I am not getting an address. Are you using a cell phone? What is your address? Addresso. I need addresso.
¿Por qué es adreso?
I don't understand. Speak English. Is there someone there that speaks English? Can someone help me here? Does anyone speak Spanish?
Mi nieta está herida, sangrando. ¿No entiende?
I'm sorry, no Spanish, English. Call back with... I'm sorry, I don't know what to do. Please call back with someone who speaks English.
Okay.
Since its earliest beginnings, one of America's greatest enduring...
So as we know, we are required to provide meaningful communication and effective communication. In this episode, you saw that communication actually happened. Both people were talking. But was it meaningful? Was it effective? And how do we provide that? This is just the comparison of language groups that we've encountered in our state in comparison with the language groups of the whole nation. I've put the names of the languages in green just to kind of indicate that I am from the Evergreen State. And also green is part of the Seahawks colors. But this list is in the order of numbers. So the largest group is Spanish, but the second largest LEP group is Russian. And from here I cannot see, so I will be looking in my notes. Then goes Vietnamese, Chinese, Korean, Somali, Arabic, Cambodian, which is named inaccurately because the name of the language is Khmer. Punjabi, Ukrainian, Amharic, and Lao. The languages that are marked with asterisk are actually supported languages. We have the system, both DSHS and HCA and now Health Benefit Exchange, where the notes to the clients are sent automatically, and for those 8 languages, they're automatically translated. So the notes and letters consisted of text blocks. We pre-translate those, and once the worker enters certain text block, which might be the reason code, why they deny or why they reduce the benefits, or the requirement that the person needs to provide certain documentation, additional information, whatever that might be, that's numbered for the English, that block is numbered, and it's translated into 8 languages, and then anytime any worker chooses that reason or that text block, it automatically translated into the language, into 8 of those languages. So what we did was we reduced the need of translating every individual letter over and over and over again for over the 1,000 of, let's say, Somali-speaking clients. And by the way, all 12 languages, except Laotian, it's the 13th one, they represent the populations that reach 5% or 1,000, whichever is lesser. So all of those groups have beneficiaries over 1,000, and it's households, so it's not really individuals, it's families. So what is language access services? This phrase describes services that agencies use to breach the communication barrier with individuals who cannot speak, understand, read, or write English fluently. In the note, I also say that we provide services to the individuals who have speech disability, hearing, and/or vision loss, and covered by Americans with Disability Act of 1990. How we provide those services? Of course, the fastest and the best is bilingual employees. They are the best multitaskers. They know the services that they're providing. They can do the best explaining whatever they need the client to know. However, there are limitations to that too. We encounter over 200 different languages that our customers and clients speak. We cannot have bilingual employees in all those languages at every point of the contact. We also require by our RCW that those employees who are using bilingual skills are having the payment differentiation. We are also required that they are tested for the quality of their language services, and we need to do annual review of whether the position still requires that language skill based on how many contacts the person has, what is the population, and this is constantly changing. We know all the demographics change, so there are challenges. And then I like the quote that I put there from somebody who is the CEO of the language agency. He said that multilingual Employees must be utilized properly to be an asset and not a liability to entities. Employers must respect a bilingual worker's limits or maximum load capacity to bridge and not crash cultural gaps. So you can only imagine how sometimes bilingual employees, even though they have a caseload to provide services directly, could be moved and asked to interpret for their colleagues somewhere, and this is unacceptable. So types of the language services. All of the rest ones are contracted and require contract management, which is basically my responsibility. So one of those are interpreter services in person, and as the saying goes, it takes two to tango. It takes three to interpret. And I want to applaud our wonderful interpreters today, sign language interpreters. You can see that they're working in team, but it's still one entity. Then you have panel, it's another one, and then you, listeners, it's the third one. So it's always like that. Then remote so interpreter services over the phone, over the video, or however that may be. It's when you call, or when the client calls, or when two of the people are in the same room, but they need an interpreter and it happens over the phone. Translators, however, are transferring the message from one written language into another, and they usually work by themselves. They do, and it's supposed to be the part of the process, send their work then to the linguist of the similar qualification, but it's still kind of sole work. And I'm trained in both, so I know that translators are consulting materials pertaining to the theme that they're translating on, dictionaries, glossaries, subject matter experts, and whatnot. So we are translating all forms, publications, flyers, notices, auto-generated text, as I explained to you, by ACES and Provider One. These are our automated systems, client-specific letters. And then for the clients who are requiring, for example, conversion into Braille, we Braille our materials. We provide audio materials for them, and also closed captioning. And you saw that closed captioning we saw here, and you saw it on TV many times, or at the sports bars or whatever, so you know what that is. HCA is actually required also to make sure that our contractors and service providers are also adhered to the requirements of equal access. So HCA has a contract for medical providers, for interpreters, and they also help DSHS staff to get in-person interpreters. It's a separate section in our agency. And here are the wonderful resources, as you may know, lep.gov, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Migration Policy Institute has a wonderful, wonderful presentation on technology, pluses and minuses. If you're interested, you can find it there. In our state, we have an agency, all-volunteer coalition, Washington State Coalition on Language Access. I am on their board. At the end of October, they're going to have their 11th summit, and any one of you who is interested, invited to register. And of course, it was mentioned that we have language testing and certification program of DSHS, which Healthcare Authority continues using. I used to manage that testing and certification program some years ago. This is for my staff. If they have questions, they need to know where to go to Language Access Advisor, because my responsibility is to make sure that we are in compliance with all the statutes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. That was, I think it's really helpful and inspiring to see what's possible. You've got a pretty comprehensive program there in the state of Washington. Resources, of course, is the major determining factor, but with the will and maybe with some pressure, we all have the possibility of getting to a place where you guys are at. So we're going to shift gears and go East Coast now, and hear from Kleber and about the New York City Department of Education. Oh yeah, and I'll get your power.
Sure.
Have the clicker.
Yeah. All right, so good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be back and see old friends and have the opportunity to make new friends. Every time I come, I go back having met so many great people and hearing so many stories, and we all want the same thing, right? We all want communication, we want to engage people. I also have the honor of taking the last slot of the day, right? Which, by the way, is one of the two best slots, one of the two worst slots of the day, right? You guys know which one the other one is?
The first.
Lunch. Before lunch or after lunch? After. I would say before, but after's fine. So, a little bit about me. As mentioned, my name is Kleber Palm. I'm the director of the Translation Interpretation Unit for the New York City Department of Education. I've been running that department for 12 years now. Prior to that, I did the same thing in the Los Angeles Unified School System in California. So I've been in the business of education and language access for some time. A little bit about the DOE, the New York City Department of Education. Just some numbers sometimes still amaze me in terms of the size of the system that we're working with. We have over 1.1 million students in our school system, over 1,800 schools, and over 180 different languages are spoken throughout the city. And then the number that affects me the most, in addition to those first three, is the last bullet, the one that says 40% of our households speak a language other than English at home. So almost half. So almost half of our population that we want to engage and we want to educate their children and make sure that they are succeeding. We need to do a lot to communicate with them and make sure that they're engaged. So as we have heard already throughout the day, it's the right thing to do. There are mandates both at the federal level, at the local level, and in some cases the state level. But this is our piece, and this is a piece that's true for any school system anywhere in the country. Here we can envision the education system or the schooling process to be, think of it as a three-legged stool, right? The three legs are made up of the student wanting to do well and learn and show up in school and pay attention. The second are our teachers and the school administration to make sure they're doing their job in teaching. And thirdly, it's the parents and the family to support the children throughout the process. And those three pillars need to be in place for a child to succeed in most cases. And this is why parental engagement is a big topic in school systems throughout the country. And it's there to get to what you see on your screen now. So earn higher grades and test scores, enroll in higher level programs, get promoted and earn more credits, adapt better, and so forth and so on. And ultimately graduate, have an education, go on to college. So all that is there because of the support of families and parents. And to do that in a place where almost half the population doesn't speak English is a challenge in itself, right? And not only that, in some cases what we're battling against just cultural differences as well. In many cultures around the world, you don't go to school. You know, the school that's their job, to educate your child. You only go to school if your child's in trouble in many cultures. And here we are trying to tell our parents, come participate, come engage, come be informed, come to this meeting, open house, parent-teacher conference. The list goes on and on and on. And to try to get not only over the language barrier, but also the culture barrier is quite a task in working within the educational system. To make it even more complicated, there are two other factors that I want to point out. One of which is, even though as a school administrator, our client per se is the student, right? The student's the person we see every day walking through the schools. My task and the language access efforts at the Department of Education or anywhere in a school system is actually trying to engage the extended client, which in this case is the parents and the families, right? So we don't see parents and families every day, but we want to make sure they're getting information, that they know what's available to them, programs and services for their child, and so that they're informed about how their child is progressing or not at the school level. So those are some just basic barriers or obstacles that we need to address and first of all, recognize and then find ways to overcome those barriers, and to do so in a way that addresses all of these people in all of those languages that you see on your screen there. So that's just a quick snapshot of what the top 10 languages are in the Department of Education in New York City. It doesn't necessarily mean these are the top languages in New York City. It just means these are families who have a child in the school system, which there can be some variance in some of the languages. So these 10 languages make up about 95% of our households. So that's a great start. That's being proactive. If you do a document translation into the 9 languages, you're getting ahead of the game by 95%, which is great and sounds fantastic. But it's the other 5% that you don't see there that reflect actually the other 170 languages that we have in our school system. And that's the challenging part for us. And with that 5% come some languages that may be much more frequent in these parts of the world. They're less frequent in those parts of the world. There are also languages that are emerging languages. We get a lot of Native American individuals from Central and South America who don't speak Spanish. And so that's a challenge. And other languages that we get from other parts of the world, there's no written language, it's only oral or verbal, which is the case here in some cases as well. So these are all challenges that we're confronting. So what the Translation and Interpretation Unit, which is my office, we have several goals. One obviously is to provide the services that are part of the name of what the unit is called, Translation and Interpretation. So we are a little bit about the unit. We have a staff of 40 full-time employees, 30 of which are translators, full-time translators, covering the 9 languages that we're mandated to do within the New York City school system. And so I pretty much see the unit. Historically, I've seen it as a service provider of sorts, a language service provider, a mini translation bureau, if you will. But it has evolved to become much more. Not only do we want to provide a service for our schools so that they can communicate with their families, we are now extending that and touching the world of language access, which is why we're here today, is creating that welcoming environment, is changing the culture so that translation interpretation is a proactive step instead of a reactive step, which is in most cases what's happening in a lot of areas. So providing training, raising awareness is something we're working very hard in doing. Monitoring language access compliance and oversight of the provision of services. So we've evolved to become a compliance arm of what we want to do. We want to make sure that schools are doing what they have to do, what the law says, and again, it goes back to just the right thing to do. And we're also tasked with making sure that our parents understand that they have this right and that they know how to access these services. And that's something that we haven't done a very good job in the past, so we're focusing a lot of our efforts in ensuring that our population knows where to go, what to do, and how to get the services. But that also assumes that our 1,800 schools know what to do once parents show up as well. So it's trying to do things, it's building that infrastructure, changing that culture, which is an ongoing process. It doesn't happen overnight. We're not even close to changing that culture, but we've made great strides. But it also is really important so that parents understand what to do and where to go, because that'll help change the culture sometimes. Some of the resources that we have made available through the translations unit obviously is the document translation into the 9 languages, which I mentioned, the in-house staff that we have. We do the best we can with even though I said 30 and 40 individuals, there's still limited resources at the end of the day with a system that big. It's not enough. So we do the best we can, and we try to be creative in creating templated materials, using technology to make sure that we're being efficient in what we do. We also provide the over-the-phone service that has been touched on throughout the day today with an outside provider that allows us to do that in over 200 languages. And that's critical. That service is really taken off. A child gets hurt at school, the first person they're going to call is the house or the mother or the father at work or at home. And that if that parent doesn't speak English, there needs to be someone quickly to be easily accessible to make those phone calls. A child shows up late, is missing, or whatever the case may be. So the phone service is really, really taking off. We provide on-site interpretation services for select for several DOE administrative offices. At the central unit, we do not have the capacity to send interpreters to 1,800 places every day. So a lot of that falls on the schools to take on and to make sure that they coordinate and engage resources needed to address that need. So we do it just to support the major events that go on within the Department of Education. We go through, every 3 or 5 years, we go through an extensive RFP process to make sure we have contracted vendors on board that can help support what we do. The translations unit cannot do it all by all means, so we need help in doing so. So we make sure that we find an adequate provider for those services. And we also advocate to make sure that schools have specific earmarked funding. So schools get budget for a little bit of everything, but we're the driving force to make sure that they get a piece of that budget is earmarked specifically for language access, and that makes a big difference. So what that means is they can't use it for anything else but language access. And within the budget codes and the systems, which I'm not well versed in, it locks it down to make sure that they could only select the budget line that correlates with either vendor services or interpretation equipment, or whatever, the dictionaries, even paper, an extra toner cartridge, because more translations are being printed. So we make sure that schools are using that funding, and if they're not, we follow up to make sure why not. In many cases, we have found that when schools are not using that funding, it's simply because the principal has done a good job in having bilingual staff that can address those needs. So we're learning a lot as well as we continue our oversight and monitoring efforts. Additional resources that we make available to the entire system is we create just an archive of just documents that are used frequently. One of the things that we'll talk about tomorrow is identifying vital documents. Once you identify that universe of vital documents, you make it available in a central location, and you promote the use of that site, and you raise awareness and you train staff. It helps a lot because we don't have to reinvent the wheel 1,800 times if someone wants to send a letter out welcoming parents back to school in September. It's the gist of the letter is the same. So we do that. We also create templates. I think someone mentioned earlier about templates and making sure that they are very generic and they're useful and they get the point across and they get translated once and anybody can download and use them whenever they're ready. So that cuts into the potential workload that could be sent to our office. Multilingual signage is also made available on this intranet site so that schools can print and download and just post very easily at the entrance of the school facility a welcome sign in different languages or interpretation services available in the languages that are represented in the school community. We have language data for all the schools so that they can, even though at a school you should know who your population is, it's nice to see actually the data behind it to make sure you're not missing anybody. We have glossaries, so we have a whole bunch of stuff, best practices, industry tips like how to use interpreters and how to work with interpreters. So we have all that information because it's a constant educational process that we're trying to make sure that schools understand. Training and awareness. This is something that goes back to what we're doing a lot more about in addition to just providing a service. A couple of years ago, we started our Language Access Coordinator Initiative, which asked each one of the principals in each one of the schools to designate someone on their staff as a point person for language access. We now have a name and a number and an email of a person at the school that we can contact, train, be in communication with, learn from what they're doing as well. So now we have someone to talk to. Again, it's a designee, so it's not a full-time person, but it was a start. And principals were very responsive. I mean, I think there were a rebellious 100 schools who didn't appoint someone very quickly, but for the most part, we got everybody appointed and we got everybody trained. And then, so that gave us someone to talk to at the schools, which was good. We were too far removed. A system this big, being a translations unit in the central offices, we needed to be closer to the schools and see what actually was happening, what the challenges were. So that was the first start of doing that. So these language access coordinators receive training, a newsletter, they have direct access to us. And we send them resources, something we call the Language Access Kit. And in the next couple of slides, I'll show you what's in there. So it's great. This worked out great. More recently, and something we're really excited about is, oops, I'm sorry, I'm behind a slide. That's everything I just said. All right? Just testing you guys. And then what I'm really excited about is the next slide. This is the real slide I'm really excited about. Back in January of this year, we were able to, after 2 years of just working and advocating and working with community partners and the city council members and the mayor's office, we were able to actually add additional positions. We weren't very creative. We just added the word field instead of in front of language access coordinators. So we have 9 field language access coordinators. These are 9 full-time positions. They're not designees, and they are housed throughout the city. And if you do the quick math, if we have 1,800 schools divided by 9, so each one is now in their portfolio have about 200 schools to monitor and to support and to train on a yearly basis. Much more manageable than my office trying to do that for 1,800 schools. So these 9 individuals, they were all filled over the summer. We're very excited this year. They're going to be doing a lot more engaging training, raising awareness, and having that one-on-one contact with schools. And that's going to help immensely in making sure that all the efforts and everything that we've developed actually gets out there. Because one of the complaints we hear is from parents or from schools is, oh, I didn't know the translation unit existed. I didn't know it was a free service. And I'm like, really? Every year I send you something. They don't, so we just need more people to be constantly in awareness mode. To make sure that people are aware and know where to go to access these services. Very quickly, I wanted to show a couple of things in our language access kit that goes out to these school designees. On your, for the most part, right hand side is a large welcome poster that we send out in the top 9 languages, and we make sure that that's posted visibly at the entrance of every school facility. We've connected that to something else that the DOE does, which is a school opening compliance list, which is pretty cool. There's a different office that actually goes and knocks on all the schools at the door at the beginning of the school year to make sure they're ready to go. Like make sure the school is open and it's clean and the lights work and that the exit signs work. So we added on that long list of things, do they have a poster up? So we took advantage of something that was already in place instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. So now we get a report back of how many schools have a poster, how many don't, and we just send them a new one. I mean, no one really gets in trouble. We just give them another poster. So that's on the right. On the left-hand side is what we call the language ID guide, which is for language line purposes or for the over-the-phone interpretation. Again, the assumption is that the LEP is literate in these languages, and that's something that we know is a possibility that they may not be, but this shows about 30 languages or so that they can point to. It's actually an easel that the front desk at a school can just visibly present on their table, so if someone walks in, they can point to a language and the barrier is gone, hopefully. And then the other thing is a parent guide to language access, which is something that speaks to the work that we're doing to raise awareness within our communities. And this is something that's just one side. It's a 10-panel brochure. The other side has the other languages. It pretty much tells families, we speak your language. We have information available online in your language. There's a number you can call to tell us how we're doing, which is a nice way to complain, please, which goes back to our complaint conversation, but tell us how we're doing. Because a lot of people, there are lines for parents to call, but they don't know to complain about language access. They may call and simply say, I need this document in Spanish, and it may already exist, but that's not really a language access complaint. What we want to hear is, I've gone to a school, I've asked for an interpreter, they're not giving me an interpreter. That's what we want to get to make sure. So that's our goal, to hear from parents. This brochure also has a little cutout I speak card at the bottom of the panel, so it serves multiple purposes. So they get to read, they get the website, they get the telephone number, and they cut out this card so that they can have with them for future use. So these are a few things that we share with schools every year, and I think that one of the things that I like to do is make sure that I can just recap and summarize a couple of things that we learned in this process, and so that you can maybe one of these you can take back with you. And I'm going to do my best to read the slide. 1, 2, okay. Basically, just try to assess the agency for the number of. Okay, so assess the agency for the number and types of entry points you have. So look at your agency, do a self-assessment of where an LEP can come in, whether it is through the front door, over the phone, is it written communication? Is someone writing in a letter? Do you send out letters on a periodic basis? Try to identify those avenues. And it may simplify a little bit. Maybe it's all the above. And if that's the case, you have a tall task ahead of you. But if it's not, if you're able to identify the avenues of communication, perhaps you can knock them out and address them one by one. Connect language access to the mission of your agency. Which is what we did with the parental engagement piece, right? If there is besides the mandates, the federal, the state, and the local level mandates, connect it to one of your missions of your agency. And there has to be something in your agency that you're committed to do that it's easily connected to language access. And that sometimes helps sell internally the mission and the goal of getting to a better place. Identify or create an infrastructure to support language access throughout the agency. A lot of agencies already have some resources in hand or some experience in dealing with language services provider or bilingual staff, or can locate translations from 10 years ago. There has to be something. You just gotta look for it, revisit them, and make them practical. And then lastly, just expect this to be an ongoing pursuit and battle. It's an ongoing endeavor to ensure that we all get what language access means. And to make sure everybody on your staff or your agency understands the importance and how to do it. So with that, I'll end, and thank you for your time.